Paul finishes up his time with us by saying this: "So above all else, let love be the beautiful prize for which you run." Anytime there's a prize involved, or at least it used to be this way, you could guarantee there's some sort of competition going on. And I want to tell you, we live in a very competitive environment. This is a competition, a great, stiff, serious, significant competition concerning the love of God. It is not a competition for the love of God. It is a competition against the love of God. It is not a competition that involves people directly, but it is a competition that definitely centers around the adversary, the devil. Because his prime strategy above everything else is to keep people separated from the love of God. He cannot have people encountering the love of God because it is transformational. Why? Because the love of God is the answer to the human condition. I want to say that again. The love of God is the answer to the human condition. Listen, there is no methodology. There is no philosophy. There is no psychology. There is no psychiatry that can answer the human condition. All of those things attempt to address the human condition, but only the love of God can answer it. Let me show you what I mean. If I get pulled over for a DUI, there's probably some things you would know right away. Number one, that's probably not the first time I've gotten behind the wheel under the influence. Probably over 90% of people who are pulled over for a DUI have been doing it before and just haven't gotten caught. By the way, there's a gentleman running for Senate in the state of Texas, and if you haven't checked him out, please do. He has 2 arrests for DUI, plus a burglary. I'm not sure that's the kind of guy I would want representing me. But let's go back to my DUI. If I am arrested for DUI, I am immediately put into the system. And that is a natural system. You see, the human condition has its roots in the spiritual, not the natural. There is no natural remedy for the human condition because the human condition is rooted in the spiritual. Adam changed everything when he sinned. But Adam's roots were in the spiritual, not the natural. So I'm then in the system, and so here's what they're going to do to me. They could put me in jail, or they can give me some sort of whatever they do, and adjudication or whatever. But they're going to tell me, listen, you need to go to classes. You need to get some therapy because we can't have you driving around under the influence of weed or whatever it is. And so I go to these classes, and here's what they're going to tell me. You really shouldn't do this because it's bad for you and it's bad for other people. You could kill somebody. That's true. And they're going to give me a lot of reasons why I shouldn't be under the influence. The one thing they are not going to ever be able to give me is the answer to why I need to be under the influence. They cannot address the spiritual pain. They cannot address what is going on inside of me spiritually. They can take away all of the things that I'm under the influence of, but it cannot change me. Only the love of God can do that. You see, Peter was radically changed after the resurrection. Here is a man who is under the weight of betrayal and failure and shame and all of this. And one encounter with Jesus wiped all of that away. He met Jesus on the seashore after swimming from a boat to get on land. And one embrace by Jesus Christ cured and remedied all of the stuff that was going on inside Peter. It was an embrace of the Father. It was an embrace. It was the love of Jesus that sorted him out. There is no other avenue. There is no other option. The only thing that transforms people is encountering the love of God. And so the enemy, recognizing that, needs to keep people out of the Bible. Because if you get into the Bible, that's going to lead you to the heart of God. He needs to keep you away from the gospel, because the gospel is going to lead you to Jesus. And who is Jesus? Here is who Jesus is. 1 John 4:9. Here is how God showed His love among us. This is the love of God manifest. God sent His only Son into the world so that through Him we might have life. Jesus is the expression, the full manifestation of the love of God. Forget about the power of God and everything else. It is the love of God, for God so loved that He gave. That is the expression of the heart of God. And so the enemy has to keep me away from the gospel. Because I'm going to encounter the love of God if I start hearing the gospel. Because the gospel is nothing but good news. He's going to need to keep me away from the church. Because the church is going to point me to the love of God. Big C church. I'm not talking about some little C church that doesn't know what's going on. I'm talking about the big C church. His church is going to point people to His heart and to His love. He doesn't want me to get around the people of God, because the people of God operate and function in the love of God. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. It is the mark of the house. It is God's love. He cannot have anybody getting anywhere near any of this, because the love of God is so strong. It is so powerful, and it is so transformational that there is nothing to stop it. There is a parable in the New Testament that really highlights the degree of the competition that is involved over the love of God. This is a very serious thing. It is called the parable of the sower. And Jesus said, if you don't understand the parable of the sower, how can you understand all the other parables? So it is really the central kingdom parable of all time. And this parable is a parable about seed. It's also about soils. And it's also about sowing. But there is an underlying story in there as well. And the underlying story in the parable is this. There is some extreme stiff competition whenever the seed and the soil get together. In fact, the enemy is so set and so strategic in his efforts to keep the seed of the love of God separated from the soil of the heart of man, that he sends his own emissaries, the birds of the air, to literally steal the seed to keep it from the soil. You see, the enemy cannot have people knowing anything about the love of God. Do you know how many people there are in our world who have no idea that God is a God of love, that there is a God, that there is love, that it is transformational. It is a foreign concept to most people. Why? Because the enemy has come and stolen the seed of the love of God out of the context. It's not even in the story. It's not on the page. And then there are the rocks and the stones. These are hard things. Because everybody encounters hard things. And you know what hard things do? They harden us. The tough, the troubling, the traumatic, the trying things, they get the little hard things. So by the way, it only takes one hard thing to make someone hard. To make them hardened. One encounter, one experience, one tough thing. Only one, not a series, not a whole volume. It only takes one. And the enemy loves to get them when they're very young and get something hard inside their heart that repels the love of God to where they cannot handle it. They cannot receive it. They have no room for it. They cannot accommodate it. And then there are the thorns. Jesus called these all the other things that compete and get in the way. Have you ever been trying to share the love of God with somebody and you could tell they didn't want to be there, they didn't want to listen, they would rather be somewhere else, doing something else, say, oh, I got to go, I have an appointment, I have this, you know what that is? That's a satanic scheme. That's not normal. People would die to get to the love of God if they knew what it was. They would crawl to it if they knew what it was. But people routinely will reject it because of all these other things in their life that are competing against it all the time. You invite somebody to Alpha. Oh yeah, I'm going to come. The night before something happens. The afternoon, just before the meeting. Oh, something comes up. Satanic schemes to keep people away from the love of God. You invite somebody to church. I'd rather sleep in. I'd rather read my newspaper. They couldn't be talking about this local paper, I know. But I'd rather drink my coffee and read my newspaper. Okay. I don't really have time for that. Let me tell you something. One day, there are going to be hordes of people, throngs of people who are going to turn around and look, now having full understanding and revelation about their entire life, and they are going to see that way back there, when you were speaking to them, that was a divine moment for them. And they missed that divine moment because of thorns and other things that were crowding out and competing against and warring against the love of God. And they did not receive it because the thorns choked it out. And now they know, I have missed my divine moment and it is now too late. But I want you to know that the competition against the love of God is not just against people who are unchurched and irreligious and unrighteous and whatever else. The competition against the love of God affects everybody. There is a work, a scheme to keep people from walking in a loving, passionate relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm talking about church people, believers, disciples. In fact, let me just ask you this question, because I asked myself this question, and I figured if I ask myself, then I'm going to ask you. How many people are you aware of that you would consider to be in the kingdom, in the church, part of the Christian community, followers of Jesus, believers of Jesus, how many people are you aware of that are driven by a passionate love for Jesus Christ? And I will take the question one step deeper when the Lord said this to me. How many of those people are in your own home? That you would say, wow, now that is a person who is absolutely driven by the love of God. They just love God. They just love God. There's another parable in the Bible. By the way, if it's getting a little bit warm in here, it's not the word. It's the air conditioning. We're running on 2 units today. It's another parable in the Bible that I want to call your attention to. And it's classically called the parable of the lost son. And it is actually one of a trio of parables: the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. But it is an interesting parable in that it is not a parable of, as it is erroneously called, the parable of the lost son. It's actually a parable about 2 sons. There are 2 sons in this parable, not one. And both of these sons, by the way, they're not sinners, they're sons. They're not foreigners, they're sons. First time I'd ever noticed that in 40-something years of reading the Bible. God, you said they're sons. These are sons you're talking about. You're not talking about you're not talking about God haters here. You're talking about sons. 2 sons who both get all their stuff from the father. The father doles everything out to the sons, and guess what? When they got the stuff, they lost their love relationship with the father. They became other stuff oriented. So much that one son took his stuff and wasted all of it. Now the other one kept all his stuff because he is very, very concerned, the other son, about who gets the what? The best robe, the best ring, the best calf, the best party. He is just as much about stuff as the other one. Neither one of these sons has a loving relationship with their father. Neither one of these sons is encountering the love of their father. But here's what happens to one of those sons. Because in that parable, only one of those sons ever gets connected to his father's heart. Now, can we work on percentages just for a moment? 3 out of the 4 in the parable of the sower reject the love of God. In the parable of the lost sons, plural, just because he's hanging around in the house doesn't mean he's not lost. In the parable, somebody you write that down. In the parable of the lost sons, only one of 2. So how does he connect with his father's heart? This is absolutely key. There is a 4-word statement in that parable that is one of the greatest statements in the entire Bible. Scott mentioned it Wednesday night. It is this: he came to himself. You see, here's the thing. We have always thought, maybe, that the tough stuff, the trying stuff, the troubling stuff, the traumatic, the tragic, all of this stuff was meant to bring us to the Father. No. Tough stuff does not bring people to God. It's meant to bring us to ourselves. And then we will go to the Father. Here is what the Scripture says. He came to Himself. Here is the questions that He was asking Himself in light of all of this. Is this really the way I want to live? Is this really the way I want my family to be? Is this as much of Jesus as I really want? Is this what Jesus really died for my life? Is this really it? Is this all there is? Is this what I am going to settle for? There are some translations. He came to His senses when He realized what He was doing. Oh, that is a good one. Because so many people don't ever realize what they are doing. They are killing their relationship with Jesus by other things that are competing against the love of God. Look at this. In a moment of self-reflection. Oh. In the Old Testament, there's a scripture that says, but you never stopped to think that everything was coming apart. The Wycliffe Bible says he turned again to himself. It's very much a reflexive thing. He looked back at himself. Literally, okay, I'm going to look in the mirror for a moment, the word mirror, the kingdom mirror, and I'm going to say, really? Is this how I want to finish? Wow. He came to himself. It's sort of like this. How long can I keep this up? You see, this son, interesting thing, this son could have continued to just go by the title son. But he didn't want to just be a son. He wanted connection with his father. He wanted a deep, loving relationship with his father, to be overwhelmed by the love of God. Because everything that was going on in that son was going to be solved by the embrace of his father. The reason why the father didn't beat him when he came home and didn't castigate him and upbraid him when he came home is because the embrace of his father sorted him out. And it begs the question, do I just want to go to church and be in the Father's house but never get to the Father? I'm just asking you the questions that God was asking me. Am I content to just open the Word and never very much encounter Him? You know what we call this? This we call a reality check. I want to give you a definition for a reality check. It's a great one. Have you ever given a reality check to your children? Yes, you have. And I will tell you how you can tell. When you tell them, especially when they're teenagers, when you go, so how's that working for you? How's all that coping working for you? You know, the first reality, let me give you the definition of it first. Here it is. It is an occasion in which one is reminded of the state of things in the real world. And when we talk about real world, we're not talking about out there. We're talking about His world. Hey, this is the way it really is. So how's that working for you? How's all that conflict in your home working for you? How's all that inner turmoil and that confusion that you're carrying around? How's that working for you? That's exactly. The very first reality check in the Bible comes from where? God. When did He do it? Genesis, Garden of Eden. God gives the first reality check. You know what He says? Where are you anyway? What He's saying to Adam is, hey, listen, man, you're my creation. Y'all are my kids. And you're sitting there hiding behind a bush. How many people do that? They live hiding behind a bush. You've covered yourself with a bunch of leaves. You're trembling in fear. And you're absolutely overwhelmed with shame. So let me just ask you, how's that working for you? That's the reality check. And if Adam would have just answered the reality check, he would have been straight into the arms of his father. But he did what most men do. It's her fault. So how's that working for you? Not very well. The whole point of all of the junk that we end up walking through is to cause us to come to a reality. You know, healthy Christian living cannot exist without reality checks. Because the competition against the love of God is so strong, you can wake up one day and suddenly discover, wow, where'd God go? You're plowing through so much stuff that's gotten in the way. So what does the Son do? By the way, there's no 1, 2, 3 today. There's just one. What does He do? When He comes to Himself, He goes, you know what? I got a plan. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my Father, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, and then He's probably going to say this, but then I'm going to say this. And I'm going to do this, but He'll probably do this, but then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Do you know the most amazing thing about the love of God? It's so surprising. Here He comes, the Son's coming, right? And all of a sudden, He starts telling His dad this, this, and this. And He is absolutely enveloped by the arms of His Father. And all of His story, all of His plans, all of His strategy goes to nothing. Because what He encounters is such amazing compassion. He is speechless. Do you know what compassion is? Can I give you a little tiny little definition for compassion? Listen to this. Here it is. Somewhere. Here it is. Compassion. You guys don't know that I just went through 15 minutes of sermon that you don't get. Compassion is when the Father momentarily, extraordinarily, surprisingly suspends what we are expecting to give us what we really need. Hey, now watch now. Here. How can you tell? How can you tell when your life is centered on the love of God? I'm walking in the love of God. I'm feasting. I'm encountering the love of God. How can you tell? Well, there was a king in the Old Testament who had a major decision to make. And it was this. He had to try to figure out between these two women, which one their son there was a son, whose son it was. And they're both harlots. Now, the fact that two harlots could get into the presence of the king, to me, is amazing anyway. Two harlots in the presence of the king, that gives hope for everybody. Two harlots in the presence of the king. And they're standing there and they're arguing about this child. And he's trying to figure out, who does this child belong to? Who has the real love? Who is the imposter? Who's the imposter in the presence of the king? And who is the one who has the real love? So the king makes a decree. And the decree is final. Cut the child in two. But then the woman, who is the imposter, she goes, yes, cut it in two. Why? Because she just wants her share. She is not going to let go of what is hers. You want to know the definition? Well, she's not letting go. But the mother, the woman who is the real mother, the one who has real love, she is willing to release it. Not for her benefit, but for the sake of the king. You see, love is really measured by how much I'm willing to let go of for the sake of the king. When that guy left all that stuff in that parable and went back to his father, he let go of a lot of things. I can't hang on to a bunch of stuff and walk in the love of God. Heard somebody say the other day, as pastors, we need to challenge our people to seek the Lord. And then they added this, without the television being on. That's novel. Seriously. I mean, what a question. What a question. A reality check. Is this where I want to finish? Is this the way I want to finish? Is this the full message? Could it be possible that I could be missing a bunch of stuff in God? An embrace that resolves the human condition. Wow. Things that I've just gotten used to. Activities, attractions, coming against the love of God. A reality check says, how's that 5 minutes in the Word working for you every day? I'd rather have 2 minutes in the Word and encounter Him than read for 10 minutes and close the book. Yeah. I have a human condition. So do you. Mine may not be the same as yours, but we've all got stuff. And the answer is the love of God. It is encountering His love. I mean, how novel would that be for people to come to Tower City Church and actually encounter the love of God? Full bore. To where they're transformed. To where they don't just come into his house, but they get in his heart. That hurts. That hurts. We sing. He loves it when we sing. He smiles when we sing. He dances when we sing. He rejoices when we sing. But he really loves it when we encounter the song himself deep within. After everything that's been declared about the summer of love, perhaps this is the apex. There is so much coming against the love of God in my life, continually competing against the love of God. Doesn't mean everything is wicked. Just means there's a lot of competition. And the last I checked, we get one shot at this. And then comes the end. I sat down in my chair yesterday and in the midst of a bit of turmoil about things going on, and I opened up my Word. And I said to the Lord, I'm not going to read anything. I'm going to hear. I want to hear. I want to hear what you're saying. I want to hear you open your heart. And somehow, somewhere in Isaiah 54, I encountered him. And you know what he did? The very thing that I was in such turmoil about, he gave me a word and said, done, finished, over. Let it go. I've sorted it. Do we see all things under his feet yet? No. But when the Father put his arms around that Son, and he said, you're home. That embrace sorted everything out. Everything that had happened. Everything that had gone on. The other son, he never got to the Father's heart. He was too concerned about all the stuff that he had that he didn't want to let go of. Father, today, I need a reality check. We need a reality check. As your kids, we need reality checks. We give them to our own children all the time. We need them. We need reality checks today. In your own compassion and love, you ask Adam, so how's that working for you? And out of that same compassion and love, you're asking me and others in this room the very same thing. So, how's it working for you? Hiding behind a bush, covered up with leaves, struggling on the inside, weighed down on the outside. And yet, in that reality check, your grace just drives us back to you. It leads us to you. I invite you today to join me in having a reality check. How's the heart thing working? How's the home thing working? How's the life thing working? Because God, we know that above everything else, you created us to be absolutely consumed by your love, overwhelmed by your love. The beauty of all that you are. Your compassion is here, your love's here. I think it would be a great thing if in that reality check that I'm doing that I would say, so where's the love? Are there things that are trying to choke it out, compete with it, hard bits that work against it? Or maybe the enemy has so stolen the idea of the love of God for an area of your life that it doesn't even seem possible that God could even touch it and transform it. But Jesus, we know today that your love is the answer to our condition, whatever it is.